Welcome to the Derek Diamond Experience podcast, where every week I take a look inside the world of film and television with those who have lived it and experienced it. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and this is the final show of 2020, one of the craziest years in recent memory, and we're going to end it on a positive note by talking about what I consider not just to be the best film in the entire Star Wars franchise, but my personal all-time favorite movie, The Empire Strikes Back, which was released 40 years ago this year in May of 1980. And joining me on the show is once again the co-writer of Monsters Anonymous and my co-host on the Nerd Cave Retro Show, Mr. Jason Robbins. How are you?
How you doing, Chewbacca?
We're going to talk about Billy D because he's one of my favorite parts of that movie.
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing
it's
good.
The Christmas season. It's lovely.
It is.
The air is crisp. Christmas was great, and I'm excited to get this awful turd of a year over with. In what? Let's see, Monday, Tuesday, 1, 2, 3 more days, and this year will be over with.
Yeah, as we're recording this, it's we've got 3 days left in 2020. This will actually air on New Year's Eve, so just sit down and end 2020 on a positive note by hearing about one of the greatest movies of all time. But also joining us, the other co-writer of Monsters Anonymous, award-winning comedy writer, and future congressman, from what I hear, Mr. Wally Phelps. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, thank you. I'm not going to do a Billy D. Williams impression, but
Why not? Everybody's got to have a Billy
D. sounds instead.
Everybody needs a good Billy D in their back pocket to pull out at parties. Hello, what have we here?
I mean, you can do Lando. You can do the Colt 45 commercials. You got options in your arsenal if you want to do a Billy D. Williams impression.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I never had a Billy D because it's one of those things where I know my limitation.
Why don't you do it in Mickey Mouse's voice?
Hello, Chewbacca. You truly belong with us among the clouds. No,
that doesn't work for me.
No.
Next time I watch the movie, I'm going to picture anytime Lando talks, Wally's Mickey Mouse impression. It's just going to make the whole thing so much better for me. So, as I mentioned, Empire Strikes Back, released 40 years ago this year. It's crazy to think it's been that long of an amount of time. And this came out just a few years before I was born. But my first time watching it, and I've mentioned this on this show, and I know, Jason, we've talked about Star Wars on Nerd Cave Retro. I distinctly remember watching Star Wars for the first time at my uncle's house. And this is the same uncle who's been instrumental in introducing me to video games, specifically The Legend of Zelda, and a lot of other interests that have stayed with me throughout my life. And I remember watching all three of the movies on VHS, and I actually have, and you guys, for those who are watching the video version can see this, I still have the old school box set. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, I was enthralled with Star Wars the first time I watched it, the original version. And I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life up to that point. But when I watched Empire, I even knew from a early age that this was something that was kind of in a league of its own as far as movies go. We'll dive into it in more detail, but I just remember being mesmerized by Cloud City, by Hoth, the snow planet, because it was so different than what we had seen in A New Hope. It was, the ultimate contrast to Tatooine, I feel like. So, Wally, we'll start with you. What was your first memory of watching The Empire Strikes Back?
I remember I first watched it on HBO. So I didn't have the theatrical experience. But it was a big deal when it happened, too. I don't remember exactly how old I was or anything like that, but I remember just bits and pieces, more feelings than actual memories of the movie, if that makes sense. The whole Yoda and R2 sequence was it's extremely memorable to my 4-year-old mind, I suppose it was. Because I think it may have came on TV in support of Return of the Jedi, which was coming into theaters. So I probably was like 3 years old when I saw it. And the other thing that just struck me was um, the only other thing that I remembered anyway was the Luke and Vader fight, but just pieces of it. So that's the earliest memory I have of it is that, along with the conversations that came along with it from my uncle lived with us at the time, and he was a teenager in high school, and his friends would be over and they would be discussing it. So that was a very interesting time to be hearing about Star Wars discussion.
What about you, Jason?
I know I saw it in the theater. I was 3 years old when it came out, and I was obsessed with Star Wars when I was little. I had my third birthday was Empire Strikes Back themed birthday party. I still have the a card that my mom and dad and brother gave to me when I was 3 years old, and it's got Boba Fett and Darth Vader and C-3PO and R2 on it. And I wish I had it to show you, but it's downstairs. But my biggest memory of it is not just the movie, which I did have. My grandpa taped the trilogy for me off of HBO when I was little, and he went through the trouble of like, you remember there were 3 settings for VHS tapes. There was long play, which was 6 hours, then there was a 4 hours, and it was a 2 hours. And I think he put them on the 4-hour one so he could just put one movie on it, each tape, and have the best quality. And then he had the plastic covers for the VHS. And remember, this is like 1982, 83. So those plastic covers were not cheap. And he went through with like gold lettering and put Star Wars down the spine, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. It was awesome. So I used to watch those all the time. But my biggest memory of Empire Strikes Back is I still have it is the storybook that you used to get. You remember the storybooks you got when you were little that came with a tape, and you would listen to the tape, follow along with the story. It's like when you hear R2D2 whistle, turn the page, and you like that was mostly how I lived the movie at that age. And then it was kind of funny. A few years ago, I actually found that same storybook, but with a record a few years ago. So I have the tape and the record version now that I will treasure forever. But I don't remember actually seeing it in the theater. My biggest memory is just watching it over and over again on VHS when I was a kid.
I haven't thought about those like storybook and like tapes and records in years. Because I remember
I had that. I had those. I had The Hobbit. I had a bunch of Pac-Man ones when I was little. Those were great. I love those.
Yeah, my cousin had several of those, and I took advantage of listening to those whenever I would go over to her house. So I haven't thought about those since I was a kid, probably when I actually listened to them. But no, that's really cool. And what I think is, in a way, fascinating about Empire Strikes Back, and I can imagine, leading up to its release, with Star Wars, there weren't really any expectations because, it was something that had never been done before. But I can imagine it had to have been different because you saw the original movie. The characters, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Darth Vader. When Empire rolls around, one of the things that I think is advantageous with sequels in general is that you don't have to go through introducing the characters. You already know who they are. You can just kind of dive right in. Like with this, you dive right in on Hoth. You're like, okay, they're on the run from the Empire. You don't have to go through as much setup, which I think was nice, like right out of the gate with the movie.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of why I like The Mandalorian so much too, is it just drops you in basically the middle of this story. You're just dropped in and you figure it out as you go. That's my favorite type of storytelling. I don't need to be spoon-fed everything, and it was something that hadn't really been done too much. The sequels weren't really a thing back then. Like you had The Godfather 2, you had, the Planet of the Apes movies, but that's really about it. This was Yeah, not even Conan yet. Conan didn't even come out till 80.
No. I said Superman.
Oh, Superman. Well, those were done at the same time. So basically those were filmed as one movie.
Now,
But as far as Empire, like, that was a huge gamble on George Lucas's part. I mean, he funded the movie himself because he was smart enough to retain all of the toy rights to Star Wars, because that was another thing that hadn't been done before then, was merchandising like on that scale. So he made all that money and he leveraged all that, $30 million to make this movie. And usually sequels did not do well back then. Sequels were looked at as, the lesser of the movies. And an interesting note, Splinter of the Mind's Eye was written at the same time as Star Wars or A New Hope, because that was meant to be the sequel, because George Lucas wanted, and it's a simpler story because George Lucas wanted something way more simple to film as the second. That was going to be the second movie, was Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Interesting. I did not know that. I did know that, leading up to the this podcast and doing research on it, that's when I found out that George Lucas funded it himself. He did have to take out a loan, but I mean, he was able to pay that back fairly easily because, obviously this movie was a huge success and something that, I can distinctly remember watching as a kid, watching this movie for the first time. The scene when after Luke is attacked by the Wampa and he sees the ghost of Obi-Wan and he says, "Go to Dagobah, there you will learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me." And from the beginning, Obi-Wan was my favorite character. Still is to this day. And I just remember as a 4-year-old kid thinking, wow, if this guy trained Obi-Wan, he's got to be like the most powerful person in the entire galaxy. I wasn't expecting an eccentric little green alien, but
a frog person.
Yeah.
Look at you. I had the same reaction when I was a child, because I remember as you were talking about it, it just kind of reverberated, the whole thought of, oh, this whole Yoda guy is going to be great. And then whenever Yoda basically fesses up in the cave, my 4-year-old mind was blown. It was like, this can't be Yoda.
And now that we know Grogu's diet, I imagine that Yoda, like, Dagobah was the best place he could have been. I mean, it was just, he was surrounded by delicacy all day long. It was just eating frogs.
I like to think he did research right after that battle with the Emperor in Revenge of the Sith. He's like, okay, where can I go where I can eat a lot? Dagobah, let's go.
Good Yelp reviews it has.
I do have a question I wanted to pose to you guys, a hypothetical question. Do you think Empire Strikes Back would have been as good as it was if it was directed by George Lucas and not Lawrence Kasdan?
Not at all.
Nope.
I am against him directing.
Well, this has been my... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I like him more of in a producer role myself.
Right. Because that's kind of what he is right now. He's kind of the mentor that comes in and just tells everybody, yeah, that looks cool. Yeah. And this is on The Mandalorian. This isn't on the sequel trilogy. They didn't have him do that for that, and which is so unusual to me. But yeah, I mean, just having him go, this is what I want. In fact, Empire was nothing like George Lucas wanted it to be. So he was so angry at it. That's why we didn't get Lawrence Kasdan back for the third. Because he hated Empire.
I can't see why. Well, he probably hated it because he knew it was a better movie than A New Hope.
I don't know.
Yeah, my stance on George Lucas since the prequels has been, I think he's a great storyteller and a good person. Like, he would be someone I would want to bounce ideas off of. Yeah. But I wouldn't want him directing my movie.
Well, that's the thing we learned with the prequels is he's good at coming up with the stuff and good at bouncing stuff off of people when he's got people around him to tone it down. But when he doesn't have anyone telling him, no, George, that's not a good idea, that's when we get Jar Jar Binks.
Did you guys watch the beginning, the documentary they have for the making of the Phantom Menace?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That first screening where just the lights come up and he's like, well, we may have gone too far.
I like the look on what's his name, the producer of those
the other producer, yeah. God, I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
just the look of horror on his face after that first screening. I was just like, that's how we all felt, buddy.
Did you guys ever see the movie Fanboys?
Yes.
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah.
So for those who have never seen it, it's about this group of friends. One of them has like a terminal illness, and they're all huge Star Wars fans. So they try to take him to Skywalker Ranch to see an advanced screening of The Phantom Menace. The end of the movie is the release of the film in theaters. They're all in the room. They sit down, and the last line of the movie is they look at each other and like, guys, what if the movie sucks? And just go to credits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not going to I don't think we should get too far into it, but at the same time, it's like everybody I know that doesn't like that movie are our age. Everybody who was a kid during that time frame seemed to love that film.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's generational, I suppose.
Rick McCallum was his name.
Yes.
Rick McCallum. That's him.
Yep.
Yes.
I will say
Poor
that
guy.
documentary on the Phantom Menace is one of my favorite documentaries of all time.
Yeah.
Oh, mine too. I'm glad I have it.
Well, because
I remember there was a part on there with Steven Spielberg, and didn't Steven Spielberg say something to him about I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen that.
I don't know.
I want to say they were
there
outside of a
was rumors that he
soundstage.
did.
Yeah, because I remember they were looking at the battle droids or something like that, and Steven Spielberg said something to him. I don't remember.
I can't.
Just thinking maybe he should have taken.
Like, these are garbage, George.
Maybe you should have had Steven come in and been like, "So, what do you think about this stuff?" And Steven would have been like, "Whoa, George, pull it back a little bit."
That's what he did for the third one, believe it or not.
Yeah.
He brought in Spielberg to go, so what do you think we should do here?
Yeah.
Not that.
Yeah.
Is what I like to think he said. Not that. But no, that does bring up a great point that I wanted to get to also, the fact that George Lucas didn't direct it. And he didn't direct Return of the Jedi either, but from the beginning there is a tonal change in Empire compared to A New Hope.
Yeah,
and
right.
we talk about, the dark aspect of Empire Strikes Back because the rebels, the good guys, spend much of it fleeing the Empire, and evil constantly has its upper hand. And I think that's part of the appeal to it is that, even with the ending, there's that little glimmer of hope, but they've seriously been beat down. And you don't, to me,
Right.
growing up and watching, movies like this, I didn't see a ton that had that type of feel to it. So I think the difference of that is why overall it appealed to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I Empire has the best and most even tone as far as like the look of the movie, the feel of the movie, the character development. It's the most it's the best of all of them. There's no other way to say it. It's just there's something about that movie that just if not for Empire Strikes Back, I mean, as much as people love A New Hope, if Empire Strikes Back would have failed or not been as good as it was, we wouldn't have, Star Wars would have probably died right there. We probably would have never even gotten a third movie if Empire would have failed. And that's just my opinion. I mean, we may have gotten a third movie, but it wouldn't have been to the level of Return of the Jedi. I mean, it would have been back down to another $6 million movie like A New Hope was.
I mean, that's a possibility. I really, the reason why George Lucas didn't direct this movie was because he was off producing another movie, which little art house film that he was really big on called Raiders of the Lost Ark, and as a result, during the making of the movie, he thought it was going to flop. So the third movie, I don't think would be as. I think they would have made it. I think he just would have basically remade the first one.
Yeah.
Because hey, I guess they want more of the same.
Well, I mean, there all have always been those rumors about Return of the Jedi. Pretty much the same rumors that have swirled about Poltergeist, where Steven Spielberg was really the director of that film. And the same goes with Return of the Jedi. You know, Richard Marquand had never directed a movie, I don't think, at that point. He was he had only done like commercials and stuff like that, I think.
That's
And barely spoke English. And he came in and basically was like a puppet for George. At least that's been the running rumor for the past 35 years.
That's interesting. I did not know that. I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that either.
I don't think Richard Marquand had done any movies before Empire Strikes Back. He had done mostly commercials and stuff. I could be wrong, but you can look that up and let me know if I'm full of crap.
No, he did like two movies before.
Oh, what were they?
Legacy and Birth of the Beatles.
Yeah, those were huge blockbusters that were worldwide moneymakers.
100%. Legacy won the Academy Award for Best Hand Model.
Fantastic.
Well, there you go. Award-winning director.
No, but yeah, I mean, you're right. So yeah, there was two movies, but they weren't Star Wars.
Yeah,
I don't know. The thing about Empire is, I mean, it starts off. I mean, right off the bat, you're going right into this weird ice planet where Luke is riding this furry lizard thing, and you're just like, what the hell is going on here? And then, of course, you get the Wampa attack, which I know you guys I know you wanted to go into that. And then soon after that, Luke explains why he's got scars on his face, because in real life he had crashed his Corvette and had to have facial reconstructive surgery. So that was written into the script. And then we go right into the Hoth battle, which still to this day is one of the greatest battle scenes ever put to film. I don't care what anybody says, that it's still to this day is just like, I'm watching it and I'm just like, I'm just gripping the seat the whole time.
Did it invent the trope of, establishing a character who's meant to die by showing how awesome he is? Like, whenever he gets into the fighter, Dax in the back, he's like, I could take on the whole Empire, that kind of thing. And the whole time you're thinking, oh, he did.
one of my favorite moments from one of the Family Guy parodies, when they parodied Empire, Dax says that, and then Luke/Chris is like, oh, wait, really? Well, why don't you do that? And everybody's like, yeah, Dak, go fight the Empire. So Dak gets in the speeder, flies up into space. He's got like 10 Star Destroyers staring at him. He goes, hey, Empire, get ready to suck some Dak. One blaster, poof, speeders exploded.
Fantastic.
It's great. But yeah, I would also say that is also one of John Williams' best scores as far as like sequences that he's done in any of the Star Wars films. I love the Battle of Hoth music. It's like top 5 like Star Wars soundtrack bits for me.
And that was another thing. I had the album, the double album of the soundtrack when I was a kid, and you folded it open and it had like almost like a book in the middle, like a picture book of pages that you flipped, and it had pictures from the movie. And oh my God, that's still probably my favorite of all the soundtracks. Especially my favorite Star Wars track of all time is the Boba Fett's music.
Mm-hmm.
whenever Boba Fett, every time they show Boba Fett on the screen, there's this real slow swell that's like dun 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 dun, like that, and it's so ethereal and creepy, and just that music just makes me feel Star Wars, you know.
I think everybody should close their eyes and rewind 15 seconds and close.
Yes.
Because that sounded just like the London Symphony Orchestra.
Well, if I could play it through Discord, I would. But
no.
So everyone pause.
Or that DMCA notice.
Everyone pause the podcast, put on Empire Strikes Back, and sync Jason singing to the actual movie.
YouTube, I would be a happy man.
Yes.
That's actually not a bad idea. I really like that. But there are other
perform the score.
Score by Jason Robbins and the London Symphony Orchestra.
That's what I'm talking about.
But there are other great soundtrack bits in there too. You know, you mentioned the Boba Fett theme. It's also the first time we hear the Imperial March. Mm-hmm. A lot of people still don't think that, you know, they think that the Imperial March was introduced in the original movie, but no, it was The Empire Strikes Back. And the first time you hear it is great too, because you hear that bum, bum, bum. You just see all the Star Destroyers flying, and then you cut to inside and you see the back of Vader's helmet, and you hear his breathing, and he's just kind of slowly looking around, and you're like, he's back.
Yes. I mean, that whole soundtrack, I mean, you get the themes that are going to get carried throughout the rest of, you know, the movies. You've got Leia's theme, you got Leia's theme, Luke's theme, Han, you got the Han and Leia theme, you got Yoda's theme, you've got, you know, the Imperial March. So the
Force theme.
Yeah, the Force theme, you get all those came from this movie. Like, this was John Williams' seminal work. Just
like, I'm going to write the shit out of this movie.
So good.
Let's get these leitmotifs out here.
And they're so good, you hear them in other movies. Like,
they're so good, I hear them when I see my boss walk by. Dun, 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 dun.
But you listen to, like, Indiana Jones soundtrack and stuff, you hear bits of those themes being reused for other things. And it's John Williams knows what he's doing. The man is going to be like Beethoven. They're going to be listening to his works hundreds of years from now. You know?
I agree.
Yep. Also, the theme that when the Millennium Falcon's going through the asteroid field, the dun 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 dun, gets me pumped up every time I think about it.
As you did that, I just see the of the Millennium Falcon. Oh my God!
When it goes in between the two asteroids that are like almost hitting it, and then TIE fighters. Oh, so good, so good.
Just splice in 3PO.
Oh, there's a part in that movie, we figured it out too. You can actually pinpoint when they go into the asteroid field. You can actually pinpoint the part where Chewie shits himself. Go back and watch that movie when when they first go into the asteroid field and shit's going crazy. There's a scene where you will actually see Chewbacca shit his fur.
Really?
Yeah. You're like, oh, there it is. Chewie gonna need to pull out the clippers after this one.
Good thing the co-pilot's seat doubles as a throne.
Yeah.
Extra durable cushions.
Yeah. Poor Chewie.
Yeah, but you mentioned the Wampa, kind of backtracking to the beginning of the movie. We were talking before we started recording about the special editions and the changes that George Lucas made in 97 when the films were re-released, and also when they were released on DVD in 2004 for the first time. Mm-hmm. When you look at the three movies and the changes that were made, I think the ones that were made in Empire legitimately help enhance the movie. Right. Because in the initial release with the Wampa attack, you only see his head and an arm.
Yeah.
But in the special edition, you actually see him, crouched down in his cave eating, what we assume to be a Tauntaun.
I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would hope. That, and then in the DVD version is when they replaced the original actor who played Palpatine with Ian McDiarmid, which to me makes sense because he plays him in Return of the Jedi as well as in the prequels. So I think
I always felt that was weird and disjointed, the original Palpatine that they had, because that was actually it was somebody's face,
a monkey,
and a monkey.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was weird.
It's going back to the Wampa. The reason why we don't see a lot of them in the original cut is because the suits didn't work.
Yeah, they were terrible.
There was a whole subplot that was completely removed from it, where the Wampa took its other Wampas and attacked Echo Base, and they were fighting the Wampas while the Empire was bearing down on them. And
well, if you look closely in the part where Han Solo is going to get a Tauntaun to go out to look for Luke, you see blood splattered up the side of the wall.
Right.
That's because there was a scene that was supposed to be before that where a Wampa had gotten in and started slaughtering the Tauntauns.
Yep.
Another scene that was cut. Yeah, they didn't shoot a lot of it, but one of the other scenes that they actually shot was where once they rounded up the Wampas, they put them into basically a storage room. And in the you'll see this part in the trailer of the movie. They're running away from the Empire, and C-3PO of all characters rips a sign that says danger off of the door and runs off. And the Empire comes up and searches the door. An arm comes out and grabs one of the snow troopers, a Wampa arm, and then they just close it really quickly. And that's deleted scene is actually available on Disney Plus if you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So that's part of the only existing footage of that subplot.
Well, they did sort of leave that in if you ever played the Star Wars trilogy arcade game. That was actually part of the Hoth base escape. Was there were certain rooms that had Wampas in them,
right?
So that was cool. They did give a nod to that, but yeah, I'd seen some of the deleted scenes that they did have. They actually showed some of the Wampas, and those suits did not look good back then because it was like guys on stilts. It was bad.
And they were falling over because the snow was too bad, and it was bad.
If I remember right, they also included the Wampas in the Shadows of the Empire video game.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're in the Hoth base, because you see the Falcon take off, and you as Dash Rendar have to escape too, and there are rooms that have Wampas in them. So they do a little nod to that in multiple Star Wars mediums, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. The Hoth base was just so cool, though. I used to recreate the Hoth base all the time when I was a kid. Just get some white sheets and just drape them over everything in your bedroom and pull out all your Tauntauns and your toys and just have the Hoth battle right there in your bedroom. It's so great. That was my favorite.
Well, I always wanted to be in some place that was like a ice cave, like they had, because like the walls in that movie fascinated me as a child, as they do today, where they look like they were carved out of hard ice. Yeah. And I'm like, what kind of contractor does this type of work, and where can I hire them?
There is a bit of dialogue between C-3PO and R2-D2, where R2-D2 went into Princess Leia's chamber and turned the heater on, and so the ice started melting on everything. R2, you little idiot. It's supposed to be freezing.
Always trying to help in some form of fashion.
And there were books also. I don't remember which books it was, but it was actually it was one of those anthology books that used to be in the extended universe, and there was books that actually talked about the aftermath of the Battle of Hoth. And it was about this one transport that had gotten shot shot and stranded in the middle of the destruction in the battle above Hoth, and just about the survivors inside that transport trying to survive and like get away. It's pretty good. I don't remember which book it was. I'm sure somebody out there will remember which book that was in.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the title of it, but no, I know what you're talking about. But what I loved about Hoth was that it was just such a contrast to what we saw with Tatooine in A New Hope. Like from the beginning, it was like the polar opposite. You know, with A New Hope, you have the rebels winning at the end of the movie, and then from the very beginning of Empire, you have just the complete opposite. Whereas on an ice planet instead of the desert planet, and they're on the run because they're beaten fairly quickly in the Battle of Hoth. Which I agree with you in the sense that's one of the best battle scenes, not just in Star Wars, but in any movie.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, the whole thing about it is you feel the desperation in those battles, especially, the Falcon trying to get away from, Darth Vader, and the whole, Han frozen in carbonite trying to get him back before Boba Fett leaves. Like the whole movie is just, with the exception of the entire second act with Luke on Dagobah, you get kind of that get a few minutes to breathe. Like that movie is just nothing but, oh shit, let's get away, we got to get out of here, we're about to get our asses, we are getting our asses kicked, right? And that's that whole movie is just desperation, and you feel it, like the way it's filmed, the way it's paced and edited. And it's damn near perfect movie.
One of those movies where as you're watching for the first time, you wonder how they're going to get out of this.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And the situation is that they don't.
Yeah, they do not.
Well,
spoiler alert.
Well, Han and Leia had a little bit of a breather when they were in the cave.
Yeah.
Which I was like, holy shit. Whenever they were like, "Oh, this is no cave," and they fly out, and it's this giant like space worm that's living in an asteroid. I'm like, what?
One thing I was always wondering about that scene, they fly into it, and then when the Minox come by, all they have on is these little, oxygen masks, and they go outside. Wouldn't it still be a vacuum at that point?
I don't know the science of space worms. In asteroids, so I don't know.
I mean, it had its mouth open the whole time.
That is a good question, though. I've never really thought about the logic of that.
Yeah, that always bugged me. I have to ask like Neil deGrasse Tyson or something.
well, if anyone would know,
Jason.
If you could ask Neil deGrasse Tyson one thing, what would it be? How did Han and Leia survive outside the ship inside of a giant space worm?
I guarantee you get other people who be like, yeah, how did that happen? I would, because now that's gonna bug me the rest of the night. I'm gonna be like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I'll send an email to the screenwriter. Oh, that's right. Never mind.
And then we get one of the coolest scenes in any Star Wars movie, the reveal of the bounty hunters on the bridge of the Executor. And at first you see the curled toes hanging across the edge, and it turns out to be Bosk, which little known trivia fact, the suit he's wearing is actually from a Doctor Who episode. This flight suit. And I always found Bosk to be absolutely, to this day, terrifying. I would not want that lizard dude after me.
Between him and IG-88.
A Bosk TV series.
Wonder what?
I said, I wonder why we don't get a Bosk TV series.
Yeah, that would be cool.
One of my ideas,
the perspective of the bounty.
Yeah.
An idea that I had thought of, if they were still doing like the Star Wars story films before Disney Plus came along and they switched to TV series, I would have loved to have seen the story of Boba Fett delivering Han Solo to Jabba as like a Quentin Tarantino style movie. And you get to see like IG-88, Bosk, Dengar, all those bounty hunters you saw on the bridge of the Star Destroyer, because you don't really see them in the movie after that, besides Boba Fett. I think that because that was my favorite part of Shadows of the Empire, as far as reading like the graphic novel. That story was what stood out to me, not the Dash Rendar stuff, but the Boba Fett stuff.
Well, that would be cool to have like an anthology series, or like each bounty hunter gets their own 45-minute to an hour long episode telling their side of that story of each of them trying to get Han Solo and Carbonite, because that's the bounty that Boba Fett was gonna according to the extended universe back in the day, that was the bounty he was gonna retire on. Like he was going to retire after that bounty because it was so huge.
I did not know that.
I did not either.
Yeah.
And then you can do a final
that way.
Then you can do a final episode and be like, okay, this is what really happened.
Yeah.
Right. Like the end of Clue.
Yeah. Exactly. Like your finer murder mystery stories.
I always thought Tales of the Bounty, because I used to have the book, the EU book. I still have it as Tales of the Bounty Hunters. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that would make a really cool anthology style television show, talking about, each of those bounty hunters kind of gets their own little story to tell. I think that would be cool, because those are cool characters to delve into. I mean, they look cool. They're bounty hunters. They already know that the Mandalorian works. I mean, why wouldn't we want to follow, the adventures of Forlom and Zuckuss? I would.
The Adventures of Forlom and Zuckuss.
Yeah.
Well, with this Boba Fett series that's coming out, you could bring some of those bounty hunters back.
Yeah.
Ooh!
I like that.
Because it's not long after the Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. Because in the original EU, and, Jon Favreau is a fan of the original extended universe. He's bringing a lot of that stuff back. Dengar is the one who actually found Boba Fett in the desert after he had escaped the Sarlacc and nursed him back to health.
I didn't know that either.
Mm-hmm. And they became good friends after that.
Well, you could do
bracelets.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do an adaptation similar to that. Like, it doesn't have to be Dengar, but you can have one of the other bounty hunters find him, and then you can tell through flashbacks, like, you can see how Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc. You can see even stuff, years prior with those bounty hunters and how they interacted with each other. Because I think that's what's going to be cool about the Boba Fett series, is it has a chance to really dive into that, gangster bounty hunter world that we've seen a little bit of it in The Mandalorian, but I think you can really dive into it on the Book of Boba Fett.
And that's the part of Star Wars I always found the most interesting, is those characters you didn't really get to know, but were so interesting looking, or you could just imagine their backgrounds, like all those bounty hunters, like people you see in the cantina, what was his name? Lobot from, Cloud City. Like, I want to see like the other side of Star Wars, not the Jedi and the High Council and politics. I want to see like down in the, down on the street level of Coruscant. Like, I want to see the crappy side of Star Wars, like the people that are struggling, like that is the interesting thing to me.
I just had the thought of a Star Wars game show where it's an in-universe like thing where they take one poor person off of the streets. Kind of like a Star Wars Hunger Games, maybe.
Yeah. That sounds like something Palpatine would do.
This sounds, the Hutts do it for sport.
Yeah.
God, this is an amazing thing. We need to pitch this.
Well, we have it documented, so we'll have it to remember by.
And another thing, you were talking. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say we should send this to Lucasfilm.
Yeah,
and they can adapt.
Where's our movie check?
Yeah.
but you were talking about the original, the special editions, the 1996, 7,
97
when they came out, and then the 2004. I thought the original special edition edit was, I mean, other than I like the way they replaced Palpatine later with Ian McDiarmid, but I felt like the special edition version was it was better than the original because they had done things that were subtle. Like they redid a lot of the Cloud City stuff. There was a lot of background stuff that they changed. They went through the Hoth battle and they cleaned that up a lot. They took the thick black lines off of the mats and all that kind of stuff. Just kind of cleaned it up. They left the original voice actor for Boba Fett. When he's like, he's no good to me, dead. Like that, that voice. Like I loved that voice. And it didn't bother me when they changed it to Tamira Morrison because it's continuity, but at the same time, like I like the original Boba Fett voice.
The voice you did just now was more Morrison than the original because you had that accent on there. You put
as
a little,
you wish.
As you wish.
But the biggest thing that bothered me in the original version of Empire, after Luke dives off the weather vane, Darth Vader basically loses that battle. He's going back to his ship and he's pissed and he's just like, bring my shuttle. And that's all you get of Vader. That's all you get until until he's back on the Star Destroyer. And then they changed it in the 2004 version where he's like, tell my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival. I'm like, it took that bite out of it, that pissed off. Vader's pissed now. Like, stay out of his way. And it just completely changed it.
Yeah.
I see that. I'm right there with you on that one. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I liked the most from the changes that were made were all Cloud City.
Yeah.
Because Cloud City always seemed to me like a really bad House of the Future attraction.
Yeah. It felt claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Because it was
exactly
such
a
closed, stark white set. And then, of course, they went back through and they made all those white panels. It turned them into windows.
Right.
And I'm like, that's awesome. Now you see outside, it feels like a city.
Right. It doesn't seem like, just a food court.
Yeah. And the one guy running around with the ice cream maker.
Ice cream maker, yeah. Which, as we know now, is a safe.
Yeah.
So
that shit was an ice cream maker. He was like, Empire's here. I got to save my strawberries and cream.
Hello, attention, Cloud City. Please grab all your belongings, loved ones, and ice cream.
Before more Imperial troops arrive.
Yeah.
Before more Imperial troops arrive. You damn right, because I'm going to eat all my damn ice cream.
Don't forget to grab your Colt 45s on the way out.
Have you seen my Colt malt liquor?
That was good.
And that actually is a good segue to another thing that I wanted to bring up with this movie is that it introduces some of the most popular, I don't want to say cult characters, but really some of the more popular characters in the entire franchise. This is the first time you see Boba Fett in live action. Mm-hmm. First time we meet Yoda. And also Lando Calrissian, played by Billy D. Williams. And he had a little bit more to do in Return of the Jedi, but I feel like since he was introduced, like, I don't know if it was just the natural coolness that he portrayed, but Lando became one of the most popular characters. I know a lot of Star Wars fans that I like, they say Lando's up there on my favorite character list.
Right.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense because Lando is the coolest man in the galaxy.
Well, I mean, he goes from the guy that, turned in our arguably favorite character at that point, turned them all in, and Han, his friend, gets frozen and taken away. And it really wasn't his fault. And he tries to make it right at the end. He's like, go to the East platform to save Han. The only guy in the whole trilogy that can't pronounce Han correctly. Uh, and he makes it right. I mean, the guy ends up blowing up the second Death Star. So that's quite an arc for that character who could have just stayed, if any other, movie franchise, he would have probably just been, a secondary character. Stayed a secondary character throughout the whole thing, but he becomes a hero of the rebellion, a general. Like, he blows up the second Death Star. Like, that's quite an arc for a character like that.
Do you think that that character would have had the same appeal had it been someone besides Billy D?
It really depends on the actor. I mean, it would have to be who?
Eddie Murphy.
No. How you doing, Chewbacca?
Stick a banana in the back of a TIE fighter.
I mean, we're talking 80s, early 80s actors. Who would we be? Who would be BC? Would be Lando? No one.
No.
Yeah, I really can't think of anybody that would have captured that same charm that Billy D did.
Not a soul.
And then his return in Rise of Skywalker was, like, we all kind of knew it was going to happen, but whenever he took that mask off and it was Billy D, everybody was like, "Oh my God, it's Lando!" It
would have made so much more sense for him to be in The Last Jedi as the code breaker.
Oh, 100%.
It would have made so much more sense.
Well, even
and introduce that character back in. I mean, missed opportunities, man.
So are you talking about him replacing Benicio del Toro?
Yeah, because he had no point in that movie. None whatsoever. There's no point in him being in that movie. We never see him again.
True. I think
That's true.
I think you could have even had him be the original person that Finn and Rose were looking for. The guy with the white jacket with the flower on it. Like, that could have been Lando, and it could have just been like it would have been fan service, but I still think it would have been a really cool moment.
Just a moment in time, because, we could always bring him back for the third one.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm not going to go off track, but I think Benicio del Toro's character did serve a purpose, but, I'm not going to go into it.
Yeah,
we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about a better movie.
that movie's a subject for a whole separate podcast.
Yeah.
But another thing, too, is that the introduction of Yoda as well, because I alluded to earlier about how I thought, well, this must be like the coolest person in the entire galaxy if they trained Obi-Wan. And that moment whenever he's just being, the eccentric, goofy alien that's invading Luke's camp, and whenever he just looks up in the sky and says, "I cannot teach him," the boy has no patience. We're like, "Oh boy, Luke, you done screwed up now."
Uh-huh.
And one of the other cool moments that Yoda is involved with that they don't really expand upon, but to me is one of the more interesting moments of the entire trilogy, is when Luke goes into the cave and fights Vader and, cuts his head off, and then the mask explodes and he sees himself. It's never really explained, like, how did that cave become strong with the dark side? So, like, from the very beginning when I saw it for the first time, I was like, that's one of the more interesting things. Like, makes me wonder what happened.
Well, in the original EU, and I know I'm bringing stuff, a Sith Lord had died in that spot. So that's why the cave was so heavy with the dark side of the Force. Okay. And plus, the dark side of the Force, plus the sheer amount of the trees and canopy and swamp and gases and the amount of living creatures were able to hide Yoda so well from the Emperor, because there weren't too many places Yoda could have gone that he wouldn't have been, detected by Palpatine. He wouldn't have been able to use any Force powers whatsoever. He would have just had to go into complete hiding at that point.
One thing I did want to bring up also about The Last Jedi is that I liked when Yoda appeared to Luke that he was the Yoda from Empire and not the Yoda from the prequels, because attitude-wise, they're very different. I was glad that he was that, again, that goofy, kind of eccentric. He sets the tree on fire and he's just like kicking his feet up and laughing while Luke's panicking and everything. So that was one of the cooler callback moments from that movie.
Well, it really explained to me, like, when he's talking about going into the cave, what's in there, what you bring with you. And he goes to walk in, he's going to put his belt on. He's like, your weapons, you will not need them. Like, what was he going to, would that apparition have actually killed him with a lightsaber?
I think it would have been different, because he's the one who brought, only what you bring with you. Yeah. Exactly. And he brought his weapons. So you're going to get some sort of combatant.
But would he have still gotten the same where he sees himself in Vader? Like, this is what I could become if I go down the wrong path, by seeing himself in his own face in Vader's helmet. Would he still have gotten that?
He would have gotten a version of that, I believe, because, and bring up The Last Jedi again, that's what happened to kind of moment. Because that was part of her training. She went down into the cave and she saw her reflection, so to speak, of what her future could become. So, it's the same thing, but, they approached it in different ways, and that's why it was a different thing. Everybody sees what they bring to it.
Okay.
Is how I interpreted it.
Now I understand it a little better. Now that I actually said it out loud and we talked about it, I'm like, okay. Now I kind of get it a little bit clearer.
No, it makes more sense when you put it that way.
Yeah. Before this, you were like, "That's the only part of the Empire Strikes Back that I."
It's not that I didn't get it. It was just I was just kind of like, what would he have seen if he wouldn't have taken his weapons with him? Would that apparition have been able to hurt him in any way, since it was just a vision?
I don't know, but probably. I mean, change. I don't know.
Or would he have seen the apparition at all?
Yeah,
it could have been something completely different.
Jacob Marley.
You will be visited by 3 ghosts: Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan,
and Mace Windu.
And a third one.
Who will show up in his own time.
And Plo Koon. Who the hell is Plo Koon?
Would you prefer Yaddle?
Fair enough. Give us Plo Koon.
Yes.
But the last thing I wanted to talk about with this movie before we wrap things up, we have to talk about the reveal that happens with Luke and Vader. Vader's got him beat, cuts his hand off, and he says, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. And Luke, of course, says, he told me you killed him. Then he says the line that is one of the most iconic, not in just Star Wars, but in film history. No, I am your father. And I wish if I had a DeLorean, if the DeLorean from the Back to the Future existed, I would love to go back to 1980, opening weekend of Empire Strikes Back, and go to a theater, because in my mind I would be like, these people have no idea what's about to happen. Like, to put it bluntly, it's one of the biggest oh shit moments that happens in film history, because then by the end of the movie you're like, well, what happened to his father? Like, how did he become evil? And things like that. So it changed the game completely. And what impresses me more is the level of detail they went into to keep it a secret. Because I think even like Mark Hamill didn't know until right before they shot that scene.
Well, he was the only one that knew, and he was told to react like he had heard that. But on set, David Prowse was the one doing the
lines.
The lines, and he said, no, Obi-Wan killed your father. That was the line he said, but Mark Hamill was the only one who knew what the real line was going to be, and he wasn't told until right before they were about to film it.
I think it was Mark Hamill that said this, that it was there's only 3 people that know: me, George, and you. So if this gets out, we know it's you.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a little. Imagine having to carry that around.
Right.
You know.
I mean, and you heard about how Harrison Ford was like, "You didn't tell me, kid."
Yeah.
And he was mad at him for the evening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, imagine you being the only person that, like, before that, the movie's about to open in a day or two. You're Mark Hamill, and you're the only person that knows what's about to happen. That would kind of suck, though, because you're the only person on the planet who doesn't get that reveal,
That's true.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to that. I mean, on one hand, it would be kind of cool because then you, in the back of your mind, to my earlier point about going back in time, like you're just waiting to see how other people react to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, it would suck to not have that initial shock because I had it the first time I watched it.
I don't think I'll ever have it. I wish I could go back and have that again.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of those moments when you've seen a movie and you're like, God, I wish I could watch that again for the first time.
Yeah.
And and to your point, I would love to go back to 1980 and buy a ticket for every showing on that weekend. Just one ticket so I could just go into the next theater and just wait. Well, actually, back then there were probably just one or two. But
they didn't have multiplexes back then.
Just sit there and just wait for everybody to come back in.
But
or time it out to where you just walk into the theater at the moment.
Yeah. Well, this movie actually has my favorite line of all the one of my favorite lines in cinema history. When Luke and Vader are about to face off, in the carbon freezing room, and Darth Vader, you hear the breathing. Luke turns around and looks, and he says, "The Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet." Just that line, you're like, Luke's about to get his ass kicked, is what's about to happen.
Well, and it has one of the coolest visuals, too, because when they start to fight, you just see their silhouettes, and you see the sabers ignite, and there's that iconic shot of Luke holding his saber, with two hands, and Vader's just holding it with the one, like, you're nothing, kid.
Right.
And I worked at the movie theater as a projectionist when these were coming out, the special edition in '97. That scene when they first, cross lightsabers, with the blue background, the lightsabers, and like the orange steps. I actually cut one frame out of the film and kept that in my wallet for years. Just that one single frame of film. I don't know what I did with it. I wish I still had it.
You're the one.
Yeah. Like nobody's gonna miss 1/24th of a second.
You'd be surprised. But no, that's really cool though. It makes me think, I don't know if you guys have ever gone through a phase where you've watched The Simpsons, but I remember watching an episode when there was a flashback to Homer and Marge going out on a date. And they went to go see The Empire Strikes Back, and they walk out of the theater, and Homer's like, "Man, I can't believe Darth Vader's Luke Skywalker's father." There's this huge line of people. Like, I would have kicked his ass if that had happened to me.
That probably had to happen a few times in real life. Somebody walking out of the theater, there's a 2-mile long line of people, and are just like, "Wow, Vader's Luke's father." I imagine there was a lot of asses getting kicked back then.
Might want to take a really fast walk to your car.
Yeah.
If you do that. But yeah, last thing.
The day I saw my father get beat up.
And then you get that fantastic final shot of them and the medical ship looking out the window, and in the book, the novelization of Empire Strikes Back, they're looking down on a galaxy, and what had happened was the rebels had nowhere to go, so basically they just went outside the solar system, and were just so far away from the actual galaxy they could look down upon it.
I always wondered about that.
Is amazing
Yeah.
Now that you say that,
It makes so much sense
to the
now.
TV.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because what's left of the rebels, they have to
Mm.
lick their wounds and regroup. So yeah, it would make sense for them to just leave the entire galaxy.
Yeah. Like, where do you go? Like, you've got nowhere you can go at that point.
Yeah. That is a really great ending shot, though. With
Right,
them
you
just
see
like,
the-
looking and you see the galaxy in the background.
You see the Falcon take off, and it's like going towards the galaxy, and there goes Chewie and Lando to see what they can do about Han, and there's Luke with a brand new mechanical hand, and R2D2 and C3PO have gotten a nice shine by the end of that one, and they're just kind of like, man, we just got our asses handed to us. What are we gonna do now?
So that didn't go as planned. What's the next step?
What's plan B?
You know that guy in the black suit, Darth Vader? He's my dad. How fucked up is that? I mean, of all the people in the galaxy, why is he got to be my dad?
I think I would just go into a room by myself and be like, you know what? I'm going to need a minute.
And then the only hot chick in the universe is your sister. I mean, come on, man. Being Luke Skywalker sucks.
You're the only person here that's in my demographic. This is an outrage.
I mean, Mon Mothma's cool, but she's old.
A little bit out of my age range.
Yeah,
I hear rumors about the kind of stuff she's into.
Could get a Twi'lek, but they have those weird head things, and could get a Mon Calamarian, but they stink like fish.
You can't understand what they're saying with their wrist.
Hey, got the big bug eyes. Now we got the frog lady. I mean, where are the human chicks, man? Where are the human chicks at?
I mean, Wookiees, they're all right.
Little hairy, but
Just
it
remember,
makes you wonder. Does Chewbacca have 6 nipples?
I don't
Never
know.
wondered that. Thank you.
They should have addressed that in the holiday special. It would have made it more interesting.
Should have shaved him down. Had like 6 nipples on his
Oh
chest
my
and stomach.
god!
How gross would that be?
Now I'm just picturing a short of Luke Skywalker doing sci-fi speed dating.
We have
in the
gone
Star
down
Wars
a
universe.
dark path, gentlemen.
We have. Well, on a lighter note, last thing I want to ask you guys before we get out of here. What do you think is the legacy of The Empire Strikes Back? Wally, we'll start with you.
The Empire Strikes Back is probably the beginning of the blockbuster sequel. The franchise of because before that, yes, there had been sequels, but not for anything like this. I'm struggling to think of any that had come out that were like, I can't even think of any horror movie sequels before that. Before 1980.
The Exorcist had sequels.
Did The Exorcist 2 come out before 1980?
I think so. Because The Exorcist 1 was in 73 or 74. I think the second one was like 78.
Hold on a second. Hey, Google. When did The Exorcist 2 come out?
Cameo by Google.
Of America, Exorcist 2. The Heretic came out on June 17th, 1977.
So 77, the same
That's
year as
close.
Star Wars, interestingly enough.
Only a month later.
Yeah.
When did Jaws 2 come out? Was that like 81 or 82?
Come out.
America, Jaws 2 came out on June 16th, 1978.
1978.
I went into a coughing fit. I started laughing so hard.
This podcast is brought to you by Google.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Very handy. I gotta be honest.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Whenever I have to spell something, Perfect.
Yeah.
But as far as this lasting legacy, I mean, like I said, I think it brought in those sequels. I believe that of course, we have the merchandising, franchising. I mean, I don't know if all of these are good things or not, but
Merchandising.
merchandising. I mean, it honestly was probably more of a commodity thing as an art, other than an artistic endeavor, to be frank about it. But at the same time, it was super. It was really good and it was successful. And even though the critics of the time did not enjoy the film, I think that is also something that is bleeding over to today. That the sequel seemed to get a harder rap than the originals do, regardless as to whether or not it deserves it.
Hmm.
What about you, Jason?
Personally, I feel like not only definitely what Wally said as far as the sequel thing goes, kind of set the standard for sequels, but I really feel like not only for science fiction but fantasy as well, kind of set the tone for the genre after that movie. I mean, you look at the movies that came out in the 80s, like not only Indiana Jones, but you had movies like Blade Runner and Terminator, Aliens, like all the cool sci-fi stuff and fantasy stuff, like Conan coming out. Like they have that sort of dark but fantasy tone about them that
Right.
Empire kind of started, and I think still kind of holds to this day, because I feel like Empire Strikes Back is kind of the gold standard for sci-fi, to where you can actually have heartfelt moments and tension and laughter and silly moments and a love story. Like, it did all those things so well that it's the gold standard for science fiction and fantasy movies.
Something that I didn't bring up that you reminded me of is the fact that The Empire Strikes Back is kind of one of those benchmarks that you can say to somebody and they'll know exactly what you mean. For example, this episode of this TV show is like The Empire Strikes Back the way it
Exactly.
ends.
Yeah.
So I say that and you're like, oh no. And it's not like it's a bad oh no. It's like, oh no, what happened to the characters that I
Yeah.
love so much? So
And it made it okay to the good guys can't win all the time. It's okay
Right.
for them to lose, but ultimately they have to win in
Right.
the end.
like
But
Avengers Infinity War is The
Yeah.
Empire Strikes
Yeah.
Back. See you.
You take you win the first act, and then you get cocky, and the second act it's the Rocky template. You get your ass
Right.
kicked, and then you come back stronger in the end, and you win in the very end. Like, that's
Maybe I'll
it's-
fight Darth Vader, maybe I won't,
you see this ship, the Millennium Falcon, it stinks. I can't hear
That's
what
great.
Wally's saying. But yeah, that's pretty much it. When you go back and you think about the way that movie was written and directed, it's telling a love story. It's telling a hero's journey tale. It's telling, it's telling us that the good guys are getting their ass kicked, but it's going to be okay. It's okay. It tells, like, what else am I missing? It's great battle scenes, and like, you get all this stuff in one movie, and it tells everything perfect. And then the character development in that movie is really what makes what we as the fans brought forward. The character of Han Solo, the character of Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker, and Chewbacca and the droids. Like, we get all that character development in this movie moving forward.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it set the standard for storytelling when it comes to film, because you have all these different elements. And I think also the fact that when you think of trilogies, you think of the beginning, how the story is set up, and then you think of the ending. And I feel like oftentimes the middle act can kind of get lost in the shuffle. And it's crazy to say that because The Empire Strikes Back, which is part 2 of a trilogy, is to me on another level, and not knocking Return of the Jedi or A New Hope at all, because I enjoy those movies for different reasons. But to me, when it comes to the way it was shot cinematically, the storytelling, the acting, the characters, it's just on a whole different level for those same reasons, because it has all the elements that you mentioned. It has the love story that develops between Han and Leia. You have the hero learning the next step in his journey in Luke whenever he goes to visit Yoda. You have that shocking moment of Vader saying that he's Luke's father. You see the elements of doubt with Luke whenever he's cocky in the sense that he leaves Yoda's training to go fight Vader because he feels like he's doing the right thing, but then you can tell very quickly he knows that he's made the wrong decision and that he's in way over his head. So you have that, humbling moment of when he just gets his ass kicked by Vader. Like, he gets outsmarted in every single way.
Yeah. I mean, he was led directly into a trap, and, he really didn't affect anything at Cloud City other than getting his ass kicked. Because if he had not shown up, Leia, Chewbacca, and Lando and the droids still would have gotten away. Han would have still went off with Boba Fett. And if Luke wouldn't have gone there, he would still have his hand. He wouldn't know that Vader's his father. He would still have a little bit of respect left for Obi-Wan because he was a little bit rattled after that. Like, that was a quick path for him to go down the dark side, to be like, hey, these guys that I trusted, the past few years to that I thought were, kind of my father figures, have been lying to me this whole time, from a certain point of view. To hell with your certain point of view.
No, you're right.
We should write a what if Luke didn't leave Dagobah?
Yeah, or what if Luke would have said, okay, I'll go with you and we'll run the galaxy. Like, you're my dad.
Well, I think that has been explored before, but even still, we should just do a what if series.
Yeah. Because it's sort of like Indiana Jones, and the fact that Indiana Jones didn't really affect anything in that movie. And the Raiders of the Lost Ark. If he had not done anything in that movie, everything still would have happened the exact same way.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've been learning so much knowledge on this podcast that I wasn't expecting. That's really cool.
Yeah. So Luke going to Cloud City affected nothing to the overarching story.
You, sir, are a failure.
He shows up, they get away anyway, and he ends up getting his ass kicked. And then Leia and them were in danger having to come back and get him because he was hanging, on the weather vane. Be like, Leia, my hand's cut off. Come help me. I'm hurting.
Which is exactly what he said.
That was his exact lines.
Exactly.
Word for word.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think I shit myself a little too.
That was Chewie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still feeling the effects from that asteroid field.
Chewie's like, you need the clippers? I use these a little.
You just see Chewie just slowly raise his hand.
Yeah.
You need my dingleberry, brush.
Yeah. Oh. You didn't need to name this.
I'm sure he has.
You need to name this episode Dingleberry Brush.
Oh God. And that's how.
Lucasfilm, why haven't you started selling those?
Oh my God.
And that's how you end 2020 when it comes to this podcast. Guys, do you have anything you want to plug before we get out of here? Jason, we'll start with you.
Go check out me and Derek's other podcast, The Nerd Cave Retro, at Nerd Cave Retro, pretty much everywhere. We just did our top 5 games that we played this year, which just dropped the other day, and we just dropped our Christmas commentary episodes on Christmas Day. We dropped those, which also included Mr. Wally Phelps. We did an episode of the Christmas episode of Real Ghostbusters and called Xmas Marks the Spot. And we
Written by
did
Babylon 5 creator.
yeah, and we did a Batman the Animated Series, Christmas with the Joker. Did commentaries for those, which is a very good, very fun episode. So go check
Mark
that out.
Hamill connection.
Yes.
So at Nerd Cave Retro, everywhere fine podcasts are given away for free.
Mr. Phelps?
Just my socials at the Real Big Wall in most places. If you go to my Twitter feed, I apologize for how crass I am. Not really. I'm fine with it. You can get over it. My YouTube page is me playing video games poorly. So if you go to the Real Big Wall there, you'll see my playthrough of Miles Morales. You'll see me playing Fortnite. It's tons of fun.
If you don't change your Twitter handle to Dingleberry Brush for at least a day, I will be so disappointed in you.
I'll just change the name. I'm not going to change the whole.
No,
I'll
not
do it
just the name, Dingleberry Brush.
I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, that's so good.
I can't wait. Well, guys, thank you so much. This was awesome, and this was, I think, a really fun way to wrap up the year.
Yes,
I know
sir.
2020 has been kind of crazy, so I wanted to end it, talking about one of the best movies ever made. Just have a fun discussion about it. So thank you, guys. Happy New Year, and hopefully 2021 will be better than this year.
Yes. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year. Merry New Year. Would you like some beef jerky?
And if you want to follow this show on social media, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at D Diamond Podcast. If you want to subscribe to the show, it's available anywhere you get your podcast. Just search for The Derek Diamond Experience. If you want to check out my Patreon, I'm at patreon.com/D Diamond Podcast. And also thank you to my close friends, the Unicorn Wranglers, for providing the theme music for the podcast. You can check out all their music on Apple Music, Google Play, and Spotify. That's going to do it for this week's show, so enjoy the rest of your week. Have a safe and fun New Year's weekend, and we'll see you guys back here next week for another fun episode of the Derek Diamond Experience.